All right, so get this. We're diving into some seriously cool research today from PNAS, the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences.
Oh, yeah. PNAS, always good stuff.
And it's all about this crazy concept called reverse development.
Reverse development, huh?
Yeah, so basically we're talking about creatures that can, like, rewind their own life cycle.
Whoa, hold on. Rewind their life cycle. Are we talking like time travel here?
Not exactly, haha,
Huh.
but it's pretty wild. This study is really pushing the boundaries of what we thought we knew about animal development, like way out there.
Okay. I'm intrigued. So, what kind of creature are we talking about here? Some kind of Benjamin Button of the sea.
Haha, not quite a Benjamin Button situation. Starting old and getting younger.
Right.
It's actually a comb jelly called Nemiopsis lightii. And get this, they've observed this reverse development, or RD for short, in response to stress.
Stress. So, like, they get stressed out and suddenly they're young again.
Kinda, but hold up, comb jellies. Those sound kind of familiar, but I can't quite picture them.
Oh, yeah. Comb jellies. They're these gelatinous, almost see-through creatures.
Okay.
Kind of like jellyfish, but actually they belong to a totally different phylum. And they're known for these rows of cilia.
Cilia?
Yeah, like tiny hairs that they used to swim. They create these like mesmerizing iridescent patterns in the water.
Oh, right. I've seen those videos online. Super cool.
Yeah, yeah, exactly those.
So, okay, back to the stress thing. What kind of stress are we talking about here? Did they make these comb jellies listen to elevator music or something?
Haha, no, nothing quite that cruel. The researchers focused on two main stressors.
Okay.
Starvation, which, as you can imagine, is pretty stressful for any organism.
Yeah, definitely.
And injury specifically, they removed a part of the comb jelly's body called a lobe. It's like a fleshy wing-like structure that helps them move around.
Oh, wow. So they were really pushing these comb jellies to their limits, and that's what triggered this whole reverse development process.
Exactly. And what's remarkable is that under both types of stress, the comb jellies reverted to an earlier, smaller form, almost like hitting a biological rewind button.
That's seriously trippy.
Yeah.
So they're just shrinking, or is there something more going on?
It's more than just shrinking. They're actually undergoing a pretty complex reorganization of their bodies. Like they even regrew tentacles that they'd lost during their normal development.
Wait, they regrew tentacles.
Huh.
Okay, that's straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, it is pretty mind-blowing. And it really highlights this incredible capacity for regeneration that these creatures have.
So what's the thinking behind why they can do this?
Yeah.
Is it just some kind of fluke of nature, or is there like an evolutionary reason for this reverse development?
Well, scientists believe that it's likely a survival mechanism. Imagine you're a comb jelly out in the vast ocean, right?
Yeah.
You're this delicate, almost transparent creature, and sometimes food is plentiful, life is good,
Right.
but then conditions change. Maybe a current shifts or a predator moves in, and suddenly you're facing a real fight for survival.
Yeah, I can imagine that'd be pretty stressful.
Exactly. And that's where this amazing adaptation comes in. When things get tough, instead of just giving up these comb jellies, trigger this reverse development process.
So like if I were a comb jelly, I just want to shrink down and hide.
Pretty much. They become smaller, which helps conserve energy and makes them less of a target for predators. Plus, they revert to a stage where they can eat smaller, more abundant prey.
Oh, that's actually really clever. It's like strategic downsizing for tough times.
Exactly. Evolution at its finest, you know? Finding these ingenious solutions to ensure survival.
This is incredible. I'm starting to think these comb jellies are way more sophisticated than we give them credit for. But how does this whole reverse development thing actually play out? What does it look like?
Well, imagine you're watching one of these comb jellies under a microscope.
Hmm.
As they undergo reverse development, you'd see them gradually shrinking in size.
Okay.
They become more compact, almost like they're deflating.
So it's not like a sudden transformation. It's
Yeah.
more of a gradual process.
Exactly. And they also start to lose some of their more specialized features. For example, they might lose their lobes, those fleshy wing-like structures we talked about earlier,
Okay.
and their auricles, ear-like projections that help them sense their surroundings.
So basically they're simplifying their body plan, getting rid of all the bells and whistles of adulthood, going back to basics.
Precisely. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. They can actually regrow certain structures that they had lost during their normal development, like those tentacles we talked about.
The tentacle regeneration thing is still blowing my mind.
Yeah, it really highlights their extraordinary regenerative abilities.
So not only can they rewind their development, but they've also got a built-in repair kit. These comb jellies are basically superheroes. But it makes me wonder if they're regressing to an earlier stage. Does their behavior change too?
That's a great question, and you're absolutely right. Their behavior also shifts, They become more like their younger selves, exhibiting behaviors that are more typical of their earlier developmental stage.
So it's not just a physical transformation, but a mental one too.
Exactly. And it makes sense from a survival perspective. They're adapting to their new circumstances, becoming better suited to survive in a challenging environment. It's like a total life reset.
I'm starting to think we could learn a thing or two from these comb jellies.
Absolutely. And that's what we'll explore more in the next part of our deep dive.
I can't wait. Stay tuned, folks, because this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the mysteries of reverse development.
Yeah, there's a lot more to uncover.
All right, welcome back to the show.
Hmm.
We are still deep in the world of comb jellies and this whole reverse development thing.
Yeah, these creatures are really challenging what we thought we knew about aging, the typical life cycle.
Seriously, it's like they found some kind of loophole in the whole system.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the fact that these comb jellies can hit rewind on their lives, but what does that actually mean for them, out there in the ocean facing real-world challenges?
Well, it seems like this reverse development thing, it's not just some biological quirk, it's more like a finely tuned survival strategy. You gotta imagine what it's like to be a comb jelly, right?
Okay.
You're this delicate, almost transparent creature just floating around in a vast ocean. Sometimes food's plentiful life is good,
Right.
but then things change. Maybe a current shifts or a predator shows up, and all of a sudden you're in a real fight for survival. Sounds stressful.
It definitely is. But that's where this amazing adaptation comes in. When things get tough, instead of just giving up these comb jellies, they trigger this reverse development process. They shrink down, which means they need less energy and they're harder for predators to spot. And they also change what they eat, going back to eating smaller prey.
Mm-hmm.
That might be more common in those tough times.
So it's like they've got a plan B, for when things get rough.
Exactly.
But is this reverse development something that's more common than we think? Are there other creatures out there with this hidden superpower?
That's a great question, and scientists are really curious about that too. The answer might actually surprise you. We haven't found another creature that can reverse its development to the same extent as these comb jellies.
Right.
But there's more and more evidence that parts of this process, things like cellular rejuvenation or tissue regeneration, might be more common in the animal kingdom than we originally thought. Now, that is a really interesting idea. It makes you think about the implications for conservation. If we could understand how animals naturally use these processes, could we use that knowledge to help endangered species that are dealing with habitat loss or climate change?
You're thinking along the right lines. It opens up a whole new way to approach conservation efforts. Instead of just protecting habitats, maybe we could help species adapt on a biological level, give them the tools to be more resilient when things change.
Okay, I am officially on Team Comb Jelly. These guys are like tiny glowing ambassadors for a whole new way of thinking about survival. But how does this research connect to what we know about aging in general?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everyone wants to know the secret to staying young, right?
That is the age-old question, isn't it? And while we're still a long way from applying these findings to humans, this research does give us a glimpse into what might be possible. Remember how we were talking about Neminopsis lyti being able to reproduce even when it's in its regressed state?
Yeah, that really blew my mind. It challenges everything we think we know about the link between getting older and being able to reproduce.
Exactly. And what's even more fascinating is that some scientists think the separation of size and sexual maturity might be more common in nature than we realize. Maybe it's a hidden strategy that organisms use to maximize their reproductive potential even when they're under pressure.
So they're basically saying, hey, we're not going to let something like age stop us from passing on our genes. That's dedication.
Right? It really makes you wonder, what if this research unlocks secrets about aging that we haven't even thought of yet?
Okay, now we're getting to the really good stuff. But how much of this is still a mystery? Are we close to understanding how reverse development actually works?
Well, that's where the real scientific detective work begins. This research is groundbreaking for sure, but it definitely brings up more questions than it answers. Scientists are still trying to understand the complex cellular and molecular mechanisms that are happening.
So it's like, we found this hidden door, but we still need to figure out how to open it and what's on the other side. What are some of the key things that researchers are looking into?
One major area is genetics. Scientists are studying the comb jelly's genome in detail, trying to find the specific genes that get turned on or off during this reverse development process. It's like they're trying to crack a code, the biological code that tells these creatures to rewind their lives.
Wow, I bet that's super complex. It's like trying to read an instruction manual in a language you've never seen before.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just about identifying the genes involved. It's about figuring out how they interact with each other, how they respond to environmental cues, and ultimately how they orchestrate this incredible transformation.
That's like a huge puzzle with tons of pieces.
Exactly. Another key area of research is focusing on stem cells, those incredible cells that can develop into different types of cells in the body. It's possible that these stem cells play a critical role in the comb jelly's ability to regenerate tissues and actually reverse its development.
So if we can understand how these stem cells are being used, could that lead to breakthroughs in regenerative medicine for humans?
That's exactly what makes this research so exciting. It's not just about understanding something cool happening in some far-off corner of the animal kingdom. It's about unlocking new ways to treat diseases, repair damaged tissues, and maybe even rethink how we approach aging itself.
Now that's what I call a deep dive.
Okay.
But before we wrap up this part of our exploration, I got to ask, what about the ethics of all of this? We're talking about potentially messing with the aging process, and that's a pretty big deal.
You're absolutely right. The ethical considerations around this research are just as important as the scientific discoveries themselves. And that's actually something we'll be talking about in the final part of our show.
Okay, I am on the edge of my seat. This is one of those topics that makes you think about the big picture,
Hmm.
the future of humanity, and the choices we might have to make as we uncover more and more secrets about the natural world.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing. Stay tuned, everybody, because the conversation is just getting started.
Yeah. Welcome back to the show, everyone. We've spent the last couple of parts diving deep into this whole reverse development thing, learning about a comb jelly that can basically turn back time.
And we've talked about what that could mean for conservation medicine, even how we think about aging.
But now it's time to tackle the big question that's been kind of lurking beneath the surface of all this mind-blowing science. What are the ethical implications of actually messing with the aging process?
Yeah, that's a really important question. It deserves some serious thought.
Yeah.
As with any scientific advancement that could really change how we understand life, and our place in the world, we need to have a careful and open discussion about the potential benefits and the risks.
So where do we even start with something this complex?
I think a good place to begin is to acknowledge that if we actually figure out how to manipulate aging, it would raise some fundamental ethical questions. For instance, imagine if we developed technology that could significantly extend how long humans live.
Okay.
Who would have access to that? Would everyone be able to benefit, or would it only be available to the wealthy and privileged?
That's a huge concern. We already see how unequal access to healthcare creates a divide between those who can afford the best treatments and those who can't.
Yep.
If we add age-manipulating technology to the mix, it could make that gap even bigger. Imagine a world where the rich could potentially live way longer than the poor.
Yeah, it's a pretty disturbing thought. It raises serious questions about fairness and justice. And it's not just about access either. We also have to think about how widespread age manipulation would impact society as a whole. How would it affect our social structures, our economies, our understanding of generational roles and responsibilities?
It's mind-blowing to even think about.
Yeah.
Our entire society is built around the idea that we age and eventually die. What happens if we start messing with that basic truth? It could lead to all sorts of unintended consequences that we can't even imagine.
Absolutely. It's like opening a Pandora's box. But on the other hand, we can't forget about the potential benefits. We talked about using this knowledge for conservation, helping endangered species adapt, and think about the possibilities for medical breakthroughs. Imagine being able to treat age-related diseases, repair damaged tissues, and give people the chance to live longer, healthier lives.
I see what you mean. There's so much potential for good. But how do we balance those potential benefits against the ethical risks? How do we make sure these technologies are used responsibly and for the good of everyone, not just a select few?
That's the million-dollar question, and there are no easy answers. It requires a multifaceted approach with open and honest conversations between scientists, ethicists, policymakers, and the public. We need to set clear ethical guidelines and regulations for developing and using any technology that can change the aging process.
That's a big challenge. But it's so important to start talking about these things now before it's too late. This research is a wake-up call. It reminds us that scientific progress doesn't happen in isolation.
Yeah.
It has social and ethical implications that we can't afford to ignore.
Couldn't agree more. This is where science and society intersect, and we have to navigate that intersection carefully and thoughtfully.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of reverse development, let's leave our listeners with a challenge. This isn't just a topic for scientists and ethicists to debate. It affects all of us. Stay informed, ask questions, and get involved in these important conversations. The future of aging might very well be in our hands, and it's up to us to shape it responsibly.
Well said. I think that's a great note to end on. Let's keep exploring, keep questioning, keep the conversation going. After all, that's what the deep dive is all about.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode. Thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery. We'll see you next time.